Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Justice for Women lecture. My name is Peter Pittigoff. I'm Dean of the University of Maine School of Law, and I thank you all for joining us tonight. We're extremely fortunate to welcome the Honorable Unity Dow of Botswana. Unity Dow is, I'm going to embarrass you now, is brilliant and courageous. She's generous and she's kind. She's a woman with an amazing life story. She grew up in rural Botswana. She studied law and practiced as a lawyer. She was eventually appointed judge and served for 11 years as the first woman judge of the High Court of Botswana. She's widely renowned as an author and novelist and as a human rights activist. We all look forward to her presentation this evening. We can look forward to a proper introduction for Judge Dow in a few minutes from Maine Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Lee Softly. But first, let me say a few words about this lecture and this lecture series. The University of Maine School of Law established the Justice for Women lecture series last year. It was with support and leadership from Catherine Lee. More about Kathy, too, in a moment. The goal of this series is to engage people of Maine in a global conversation about justice for women and girls in the developing world and justice here in Maine. Tonight is the inaugural lecture in an annual series, and we look forward to continuing this tradition for years to come. Among her many activities while here, Judge Dow spoke with students at the Mitchell Institute last night and at Portland High School this afternoon, where Mayor Michael Brennan presented her with a key to the city, which is the city of Portland, which is the first time he ever presented the key to the city to anyone. The Justice for Women lecture is an important reflection of the values and the momentum of the law school. As Maine's public law school, we take our public service mission very, very seriously to promote justice and to further our understanding of today's complex society. We're a law school with a commitment to local impact and with a global reach. We're about to launch a new refugee and human rights clinic, expanding our clinical program where students and faculty will represent people facing deportation in asylum cases. And we hope to expand that over time with curricular offerings and engagement with wider issues of policy. There are many, many notable people in the audience today, and I hesitate to name names, but let me give a special welcome to Judge Dow's daughter, Natasha Dow. Natasha is doing graduate study at Indiana University in Indianapolis and is here for a 3-day visit along with her mom. So welcome. And I want to give special thanks to my colleague at the law school, Lexi Morris. Lexi has been instrumental and unflappable in organizing this event, as well as coordinating related events for Judge Dow with a number of other institutions in Maine. So thank you very much, Lexi. The way we found our way to Judge Dow was through an advisory council for the Justice for Women lecture series. It's an amazing group of people from around the world, some of them here tonight, including Selma Botman, president of the University of Southern Maine, Libby Hoffman, a longtime leader in peace initiatives, Judy Carl, civic leader, including her work with Pathfinder International, Faye Lupi, director of the Violence Intervention Project here in Maine, Charles Norkey, my colleague at the law school, Cora Weiss, who has been a longtime activist for peace in the world, the Honorable Joyce Wheeler of the Maine Superior Court, and as I mentioned, Justice Lee Softly. There are others unable to attend, and we thank them as well. They're listed in the program. I also will defer to Kathy for specific thanks, but thanks to all the people here in the building and elsewhere who've donated to help make this lecture and lecture series happen. Of course, also on the advisory council is Catherine Lee. Kathy Lee is a lawyer, she's an entrepreneur, she's a civic leader, she's founder of Lee International. She's engaged in global practice addressing issues of climate change. She travels extensively around the world and is passionate about justice for women and girls in developing nations and here in the US. It was her inspiration, her determination, and her support that gave rise to this exciting new lecture series. Kathy will present a few remarks now, and then she will introduce Chief Justice Softly, who in turn will welcome our distinguished lecturer, Unity Dow. Please join me in welcoming Catherine Lee.
Two years ago, I attended the annual reception of the Women's Law Association Mentoring Program. It's a program that pairs women lawyers in the community with women law students. The students there were so curious about my international travels, the path that I followed from law school to doing climate change in the developing world, what issues people talked about and cared about in the remote places that I traveled to. They were especially intrigued by the extraordinary work that I described that I'd seen in many of my travels in the area of justice for women and girls. I left the reception feeling that I wanted to do something, I needed to do something to keep that enthusiasm alive. Shortly thereafter, I approached Law School Dean Peter Pitagoff with the idea to create a new lecture series that would bring a distinguished speaker from the developing world to Maine every year. Key to that idea was that the speaker would, in addition to this public lecture, spend several days engaging with community members, students of all ages, faculty, representatives of our evolving and growing immigrant communities, and members of the public. The dean immediately embraced the idea and has worked tirelessly to support it, backed up always by Lexi. We created an advisory council, as Peter told you, from Maine, New York, Washington, Geneva, Uganda, and other parts of the world to help us find great speakers like Judge Dow. We established the Justice for Women Lecture Series endowment, and we were off and running. My vision for the Justice for Women and Girls Lecture Series is to see it expand to include an internship for a young person in Maine, perhaps in the country of the speaker. And I'm absolutely thrilled to tell you that after meeting with law students yesterday, Judge Dow agreed to have an intern either at her human rights practice or one of the organizations that she's affiliated with in Botswana. So that part of the program is also launched tonight, thanks to Judge Dow. I'd also like to see us host periodic conversations in the community on this issue of justice for women and girls with participants from the developing world and participants from Maine. My hope is that we can build the endowment to a level that will permit these activities to be sustainable and permanent in our community. Tonight's turnout confirms for me that there is interest in this important issue of justice for women and girls. It says to me that you too see the relevance and the value to us here in Maine of learning about how committed advocates in the developing world, like Judge Dow, are promoting justice. In her 4 novels, Judge Dow paints a vivid picture of life in rural Botswana. She writes eloquently of the struggles of individuals when their values clash with those of the institutions that surround them, and how they find the moral courage to confront those institutions and to stand up for what they believe is right. I believe that knowing people like Judge Dow will help us here in Maine reflect on what more we can do here at home and to emulate the behavior of the people she writes about, which is in fact how she lives her life. A special thanks to all the members of the Advisory Council. They are listed in your program, as well as all of our generous donors, also listed, who contributed to making this program and Judge Dow's visit a reality tonight. And now it's my honor to introduce to you one of the members of the Advisory Council who also happens to be the highest-ranking judicial official in our state and also a committed advocate for women and girls herself, Chief Justice Lee Softly.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Kathy, for both the lovely and brief introduction. We had a conversation about we don't need 6 introductions of the people doing the introductions, and that was lovely. Although I have regularly asked that someone introduce me as the thin and lovely Chief Justice. I do it every time, and no one ever does it. No one is under oath. There's no reason that can't be done. Before I talk to you about this extraordinary speaker this evening, though, I want to thank Kathy and the Dean for their work in getting this together. And you will hear more about it in the years to come. This will be the first night. We will kick this off in such an extraordinary way that it's going to expand and inspire for a long time. And so while I have the podium, I'd like to have Kathy Lee and the Dean stand and accept our thanks for all the energy they have brought to making this happen. And so let me get right to the introduction of our extraordinary speaker tonight. Judge Dow is truly an inspiration to all of us, and it's such an honor to have her here in Maine to kick off this important lecture series. If you Google Unity Dow, which of course we all do these days, you will find descriptions of her accomplishments that make us all wonder what we've been doing with our time. One reporter described her as simply a phenomenon. Like our own Justice Caroline Glassman and Sandra Day O'Connor, Unity was the very first woman appointed as a judge on Botswana's highest court. I can only imagine the glass ceilings that broke on that day. But more about that in a minute. She is, as you have heard, a highly successful author. She's written several novels, including thrillers. She co-founded the AIDS Action Trust and Women in the Law in the Southern African Research Project. She is an eloquent speaker and a persistent advocate for women's rights. She also, in her early legal career, took 2 years off from the practice of law to supervise the establishment, construction, and staffing of a primary school. Now, who among us hasn't done that? Take a couple of years, build a school for the children. Just something to put on your resume. During her legal career, she worked as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. She won important cases, including her own challenge to citizens' rights. And in doing so, she advanced the law of child support, rape, and women's property rights. She spent 11 years as a judge and established herself as a brilliant and eloquent jurist. She left the bench after a decade to continue to pursue her efforts to change the world. She has since taught at Columbia Law School and lectured worldwide. And her support for the efforts to end AIDS, HIV in Botswana have been part of a very successful change, a change that many people thought couldn't be accomplished. And it's easy to see why Judge Dow has been so persuasive. Her grasp of the human condition and her use of language are phenomenal. Here's just an example. Describing the impact of AIDS in the world, she said this: "The problem is not scientific, it's not medical, it's everything. It's about how people live and love and the struggles people go through." Using this incredible power of persuasion, Judge Dow has worked with groups from all over the globe. She worked in collaboration with international human rights organizations, including the Urban Morgan Institute of Human Rights, the International Association of Women Judges, International Women's Rights Action Watch, Amnesty International, UNICEF, and African Legal Aid. She established a women's center in her home village, and she returns home as often as possible to Botswana to be with family and to recharge. 2 years ago, she was sworn in as a justice of the Interim Independent Constitutional Dispute Resolution Court of Kenya by the Kenyan president to serve in implementing the new constitution there. She is truly the award-winning Unity Dow, having received numerous international awards, and I'm not going to list them all, although if you'd like me to, I've got a couple of hours. She's received the William Brennan Human Rights Award in 2004, the Vanguard Women Leadership Award in 2004, the Phyllis Stern Distinguished Lectureship Award in 2008, the French Chevalier Legion of Honor Award in 2010. It's March of 2012, and I'm wondering, 3 months into the year, is there an award yet? There should be. So let me just say, selfishly, what I want to talk about just very briefly before you hear from the judge herself is her work as a judge. Among the many accomplishments that she has undertaken through the years was 10 years of writing that were absolutely judicially eloquent. And I expect that having distinguished herself as an excellent judge over that 11-year career, she's tired of hearing about this one case that keeps coming up. So with her forgiveness, I'd like to tell you a little bit about that case. She was a member of a 3-judge panel tasked with adjudicating the rights of the Bushmen of Botswana who wanted to stay on their ancestral lands and hunt in what had become game preserves. The case was tried over long periods, years, and it was hard fought. And in a 2-to-1 decision, Judge Dow wrote a ruling in favor of the Bushmen, in an opinion that was hailed as a beacon for human rights. Like many court cases, it didn't end the struggle, but the decision has advanced the struggle for many. And again, the accessible eloquence with which Judge Dow writes was instrumental in making her point. Many of us would love to have just a piece of that gift of writing. Here's how she described, and now I'm stepping away from substance for a moment to something near and dear to my heart. This is how she described an obstreperous attorney. She said, "The trial has also had more than its fair share of dramatic antics from various players. For example, counsel for the respondent was found to be in contempt of court when he was unable to muster the necessary grace to accept a ruling against him." I'm going to work that into an opinion. Unable to muster the necessary grace. Is that lovely? And so here's the quote that I will leave you with, that is with regard to the real substance of this case, and I think you will agree with me, it's extraordinary writing. This is what the case was about, and she was able to say it in just this most eloquent way. "The case being judged, though, is not whether slavery was brutish, which it was, or whether colonialism was a system fueled by a racist and arrogant ideology, which it was, or whether apartheid was diabolical, which it was. It is not even about how high the Botswana government should jump when a Western diplomat challenges or questions its decision." She concluded the issue was ultimately about a people demanding dignity and respect. It is a people saying, in essence, our way of life may be different, but it's worthy of respect. We may be changing and getting closer to your way of life, but give us a chance to decide what we want to carry with us into the future. That is extraordinary writing. We are truly honored and very fortunate to have this phenomenal woman with us today. I give you Judge Dow.
Thank you very much. I don't recognize that woman you're talking about. First of all, I just want to thank Maine Law School, the dean, who, after only 2 days, I think I called him Peter, Kathy Lee, the advisory council that made this possible, and to acknowledge the amazing hospitality that I've enjoyed in the last 2 days in Maine. Juggling Truths. Aisha is only 18 years old. She comes from Botswana. And she's standing there watching her grandmother, whom she loves very much. The occasion is the wedding of her oldest sister. And Aisha, who adores her grandmother, and she knows that her grandmother loves her as well, is watching this ritual, how her sister, 25 years old, is being introduced into womanhood. And all the women are there, proud that this young 25-year-old has finally made the decision to enter this very, very sacrosanct institution of marriage. And what do they say to her? They give the final instructions. And Aisha hears her grandmother